The Charleston night wind slipped through the cracked window, brushing the white curtain like a ghost's breath. In the stillness of the room, a pregnant woman lay wide awake, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. Beside her, the man she once called her husband slept peacefully, his face bathed in the faint glow of a street lamp. Serene, innocent, a perfect portrait of betrayal. The phone buzzed again, its fourth vibration that night, the screen lighting up with a name that had become a scar across her heart. She didn't need to read the message, she already knew. Another lie was waiting. At 8 months pregnant, she should have been wrapped in love and safety. Instead, she was archiving deception. Screenshots, receipts, timelines, each one a nail in the coffin of the life she thought she had. But the truth no longer shattered her. It armed her. And she, no longer just a wife, but a mother on the edge of war, was ready to fight back. Pregnant wife grabbed his phone to order food, but his mistress's name was right on top. The rain tapped steadily against the windows of their quiet townhouse in Charleston as Brooke Delaney shifted uncomfortably on the sand-colored sectional, her 8-month pregnant belly making every position a test of patience. The baby kicked anxiously, as if reacting to her fatigue after another day of baby-proofing drawers and folding tiny pajamas. "Honey, I'm starving," she called to Mason, who was holed up in his home office, tapping away at his laptop with that intense focus she used to find magnetic. Now it just felt cold. "Order something," he replied without looking up, his voice carrying that easy dismissiveness that had become too routine. "Use my phone if yours is dead." Brooke's phone had died hours earlier, left somewhere upstairs in the nursery among paint samples and baby monitors. She reached for Mason's iPhone on the coffee table, her fingers clumsy as she reached around her swollen belly. The screen lit up instantly, and there it was. At the very top of his notifications, a message that unraveled everything she believed about her life. "Tess, already missing you, love. Tonight was incredible. Can't wait for next week's trip." Time froze. The phone trembled in Brooke's hands as she reread the message over and over. Tess, that name. She knew it far too well. Mason's ex from graduate school. The one he always called ancient history whenever her name came up. But this message, this wasn't history. Tonight was incredible. Those words flared in her mind. Tonight, while she had been home alone, struggling to assemble the crib and plan out their new life together as a family of 3. Her breath shortened. The baby kicked harder, mirroring her racing pulse. With shaking hands, she scrolled up. More messages. Dozens, spanning days, weeks. "Can't stop thinking about you. Yesterday was perfect. Your wife suspect anything? Same hotel tomorrow?" Each line cut deeper, but what gutted her completely were Mason's replies, not just complicit, but leading, planning, joking at her expense. "She's wrapped up in baby stuff. She has no idea. You know how pregnant women are." The phone slipped from her numb fingers and landed gently on her belly. She stared up at the ceiling, listening to the rain, to Mason's typing, to the sound of her entire world collapsing without a sound. 8 months pregnant, trusting, devoted, and he was living another life, right under the same roof. "Did you order food yet?" Mason's voice floated out from the office, casual and carefree. Brooke's hand instinctively moved to her belly, protecting the life growing inside her. Her voice, when it finally came, was steady, too steady. "Not yet." She picked up the phone again. Screenshot after screenshot burned into her memory. Evidence, confirmation, the truth that would redefine everything. But for now she sat still, feeling her baby twist inside her, as if he too understood their world had shifted permanently. Outside, the rain kept falling. Steady, relentless, washing nothing away. 3 days had passed since Brooke discovered the messages, and she hadn't spoken a word. She moved through their Charleston home like a ghost, preparing breakfast while Mason scrolled through his phone, folding his laundry while he showered, smiling when he kissed her forehead before heading to work. Each gesture was like a scene in a play where only one actor knew the script had changed. Silence had become her weapon, and her armor. "You've been quiet lately," Mason remarked over dinner, slicing into his steak with mechanical precision. "Everything okay?" "With the baby." Brooke's hand moved to her belly, where their son kicked gently. "We're fine." "Good." He didn't look up from his plate. "I might have to travel to Dallas next week. Big client pitch." Dallas, the same city where Tess had relocated 6 months earlier for a regional marketing director position. The pieces fell into place with brutal clarity. "How long?" Brooke asked, her voice calm. "3 days? Maybe 4? He finally met her gaze, his expression flawlessly rehearsed. "I know it's close to your due date, but this could really help push things forward. For my career. For us." More lies, neatly dressed up as responsibility and foresight. "Of course," she said quietly. "Do what you need to do." That night, after Mason fell asleep, Brooke sat in the nursery they had painted together just weeks ago. The pale yellow walls glowed faintly in the soft light. They'd chosen that color so the baby's gender would remain a surprise. Now she knew. She was having a boy. But the real surprise had been far more crushing. She opened her laptop and began searching, not just for divorce lawyers, though she flagged a few, but for legal protections for pregnant women enduring emotional betrayal, for information on psychological trauma during pregnancy, and how to properly document and protect herself. Her fingers moved with methodical precision across the keyboard. Screenshots were categorized into folders. Bank statements were downloaded, credit card transactions dissected, every dinner, hotel, and meeting cross-referenced with Tess's recent social media posts. Once she knew where to look, the trail was unmistakable. Hotel bills in cities Tess visited, lavish dinners on nights Mason claimed to be working late, jewelry purchases, none of which ever ended up on Brooke's nightstand. By 3 a.m., she had built a timeline. 8 months of lies. 8 months of coming home to kiss her belly and ask about their baby, while living a life she never knew existed. By 3 a.m., she had built a timeline. 8 months of deception, 8 months of Mason kissing her belly and asking about their son, all while nurturing a second life. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother. "How are you feeling, honey? Getting nervous about the birth?" Brooke stared at the message for a long while before replying, "Just tired." "Everything's fine." More lies. But now they were hers, defensive lies, meant to protect her until she knew her next move. She closed her laptop and headed to the kitchen for a glass of water. Through the window she spotted their neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, out in her garden. Despite the early hour, the older woman moved with quiet focus, pruning hydrangeas with care. The scene was peaceful, almost meditative, in stark contrast to the chaos unraveling inside Brooke's chest. She envied that calm, the simplicity of pruning flowers while her own life had become a web of half-truths, betrayal, and silent resolve. Mrs. Alvarez had been divorced for over 15 years, raised 3 boys alone, and never once seemed to require anyone's permission or pity. She was the kind of woman who fixed her own leaking sink and rotated her own tires. She was strength without spectacle, the kind of quiet resilience that didn't ask for applause. And somehow, that felt more powerful than anything Brooke had ever learned to be. Maybe that, Brooke thought as she gently laid a hand over her belly where her son slept peacefully, was exactly the kind of mother she needed to become. Behind her, Mason's phone buzzed again on the counter. Probably another message from Tess. But Brooke didn't need to read it. She already knew everything. The question wasn't what he was doing anymore. The question was, what was she going to do about it? Dr. Jensen frowned at the monitor. "And you've lost weight since your last visit. That's concerning at this stage of pregnancy." Brooke lay on the examination table, eyes fixed on the ceiling, carefully avoiding eye contact. "I've just been having trouble sleeping," she said softly. "Stress can be dangerous," Dr. Jensen continued, her voice gentle but firm. "For both you and the baby. Are you experiencing anxiety, relationship problems, financial concerns?" The words hit like a slow exhale into a wound she hadn't dared to touch. Her chest tightened, not just from the weight of what was unspoken, but from the temptation to let it all go, to finally collapse into the truth. The kindness in her tone nearly unraveled the walls Brooke had so meticulously built. She wanted to blurt it all out, the betrayal, the secret messages, the overwhelming act of pretending her life wasn't cracking around her. But instead, she whispered, "Just normal pregnancy stuff." Dr. Jensen nodded slowly. "I'm prescribing a low-dose anti-anxiety medication that's safe during pregnancy, and I'd recommend therapy as well. You don't have to carry this alone, whatever it is." Walking back to her car, Brooke felt her son kick again, strong and purposeful, as if reminding her why she needed to stay grounded. He deserved better than a mother unraveling in silence. The wind outside had picked up. It tousled her hair as she paused at the curb, gripping her keys so tightly the metal edges dug into her palm. The ache of holding everything in had started to feel physical, like bruises beneath the skin. That evening, she dialed her mother. "Mom, I need to talk to someone." "Of course, sweetheart. What's going on? Is it the baby?" Brooke took a breath. "Mason is having an affair?" The silence stretched so long that she checked to see if the call had dropped. Finally, her mother's voice returned, even and careful. "Honey, you're about to give birth. Your emotions are heightened. Are you sure this isn't?" "I have proof, Mom. Texts, photos, credit card statements." Another pause. "Well, men sometimes stray when their wives are pregnant. It doesn't mean anything. You should think about your baby. Think about your family." Each syllable felt like betrayal dressed in maternal concern. Brooke's grip on the phone tightened as if she could somehow squeeze back all the disappointment. Each word landed like a slap. Even her mother was more concerned with Mason's comfort than her pain. "I have to go," Brooke said, her voice flat. "Brooke, wait." But she ended the call, sitting motionless in the driver's seat outside the medical center. The tears came, but they weren't from sadness anymore. They were from clarity. Her mother wouldn't help. Her friends had drifted away, busy with their own lives, while she became more isolated by the day, overwhelmed by pregnancy and Mason's growing distance. The people she once relied on were either absent or siding with the man who had torn her life in two. She was truly alone. But maybe, she thought, as her son kicked again, being alone was exactly what she needed to be. That night, she made 2 phone calls, one to a therapist specializing in virtual sessions for expectant mothers, the other to a divorce attorney. The therapist specialized in high-conflict cases. Both appointments were set for the following week, one legal, one emotional. While Mason packed for his Dallas business trip, Brooke moved quietly around the house. He left on a Thursday morning, kissing her forehead with a tenderness that felt almost rehearsed before wheeling his sleek carry-on toward the door. "I'll call you tonight," he promised, brushing his hand briefly over her belly. "Take care of our boy." Brooke nodded, standing at the window as he loaded the trunk of his car. The same car he'd driven to hotel parking garages, to restaurants where he held another woman's hand, to places where he'd built an entire life that didn't include her. "Drive safe," she called out, her voice laced with just the right tone of wifely concern. The moment Mason's car turned the corner and vanished from view, Brooke felt something she hadn't in weeks: relief. For the next 4 days, she didn't have to pretend. She could exhale. She closed the front door behind her and leaned against it for a long moment, feeling the silence rush in like oxygen. The act was over, for now. The mask of the patient wife, the role of the unsuspecting partner, she could set it all down. Her first therapy session was scheduled that afternoon, via video. Dr. Lisa Reeves appeared on screen, a warm, intuitive woman in her early 50s, silver streaks through her dark hair, eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Tell me what brought you here, Brooke." The words came slowly at first, then all at once. The discovery, the emotional detachment, the silence, the physical toll. Her voice cracked at moments she hadn't expected. The shame wasn't in the betrayal, but in how long she'd stayed quiet, convincing herself she could carry it all. Dr. Reeves listened without flinching, occasionally guiding the conversation with soft, piercing questions that helped Brooke peel back the layers. "You've been carrying this enormous burden," Dr. Reeves said gently, while making sure everyone else stays comfortable. Then the pause. "When do you plan to start protecting your own comfort?" "I don't know how," Brooke admitted. "Everyone keeps telling me to think about the baby. But what if staying in this is worse for him than leaving?" Dr. Reeves nodded slowly. "What does your instinct say?" Brooke's hand moved to her belly, where her son kicked energetically, like he was dancing to some rhythm only he could hear. "That he deserves better," she said. "Better than growing up thinking this is what love looks like." After the session, Brooke felt clearer, but emotionally wrung out. She stepped onto the front porch, hoping a breeze might calm her spinning thoughts. Next door, Mrs. Alvarez was tending her flower boxes, watering the geraniums with practiced grace. "You look tired, dear," the older woman said in her soft, accented English. "Everything okay with the baby?" Something in her voice, maybe the sincerity, maybe the lack of judgment, broke the last of Brooke's composure. The words came out before she could second-guess them, as if speaking them aloud might finally free her from the weight they carried. "My husband is cheating on me," she heard herself say. Mrs. Alvarez gently set down her watering can and turned to Brooke with knowing eyes. "I wondered," she said. "He comes home so late, leaves before sunrise, and you're getting thinner when you should be getting rounder. You noticed?" "I notice everything on this street. 32 years I've lived here." Mrs. Alvarez wiped her hands on her apron and took a step closer. "You know what else I notice?" Mrs. Alvarez said, her voice low but firm. "You're stronger than you think." "I don't feel strong," Brooke whispered. "I feel broken. Broken things can be fixed." Mrs. Alvarez replied, her eyes dark and fierce. "But only after we stop pretending they're not broken." Brooke looked down, silent. "You want to know what I did?" the older woman continued. "When my husband walked out and left me with 3 kids and a mountain of debt?" Brooke glanced up. "I survived," Mrs. Alvarez said. "Then I thrived. But first, I stopped making excuses for him." That evening, she appeared at Brooke's door, holding a container of homemade chicken soup and a thermos of ginger tea. "It's for the nausea," she explained, though Brooke suspected it was really for comfort. Then she handed her a small business card. "My friend, Susan Kim, a lawyer, helped me 20 years ago, still practicing, still fighting for women like us." Brooke stared at the name printed in bold. "Mrs. Alvarez." "Call me May," she said gently. "And don't thank me yet. Thank me when you're free." That night, Brooke sat in her house, still alone, but not as lonely as she'd felt in weeks. She looked up Susan Kim's name online. The reviews were glowing. Woman after woman described her as relentless, kind, and brilliant, a fighter who treated her clients like people, not cases. At 10 p.m., Brooke's phone buzzed. Mason's name lit up the screen. "Hey babe," his voice came smooth and easy. "Just got to the hotel. Long day, meetings back to back." Brooke could hear the city behind him, traffic, clinking glasses, and faintly, music, the kind that played in trendy restaurants or cocktail lounges. "Sounds busy," she said casually. "Yeah, the team wanted to grab dinner, talk strategy. You know how it is." "I do," she murmured. "Everything okay with the baby? Any contractions?" "No, just tired." "Get some rest. I love you." The words meant nothing now. "Love you too," she replied. After the call ended, Brooke opened her laptop. She checked Tessa's Instagram. There it was, a story posted 2 hours ago. A photo of a wine glass, delicate, expensive-looking, resting on a candlelit table. The caption read, "Power dinner vibes Tess," with the location tagged as a high-end Dallas bistro. The same kind of music Brooke had heard during Mason's call. She screenshotted the post and added it to her growing digital file of evidence. Tomorrow, she would call Susan Kim. Tonight, she would sleep better than she had in weeks, knowing she was no longer fighting this alone. Susan Kim's office was nestled inside a converted Victorian home in East Charleston. The brick exterior painted a soft sage green with crisp white trim. There was nothing imposing about the place, which somehow made Brooke feel even more nervous. At 36 weeks pregnant, every step up the front porch felt monumental. Her back ached, her ankles throbbed. She'd had to pull over twice during the 20-minute drive just to breathe through her racing heartbeat. But she made it. Susan Kim opened the door herself, a compact woman in her early 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and short black hair tucked behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her handshake was firm. Her smile, sincere. "May Alvarez speaks very highly of you," Susan said, guiding Brooke into a cozy office lined with lush plants and soft, calming light. "She also mentioned you're dealing with infidelity during pregnancy. That takes incredible courage to face." Brooke eased into a leather chair, grateful for the sturdy back support. "I don't feel courageous," she admitted. "I feel terrified." "Good," Susan replied. "Terror means you understand the stakes." She flipped open a yellow legal pad. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, Brooke laid out her case, methodically, calmly, like someone who had spent weeks preparing. Screenshots arranged by date, bank statements marked with suspicious transactions, credit card charges from restaurants and hotels. A detailed timeline matching Susan's business trips to Tessa's public check-ins and tagged locations. With each item Brooke presented, Susan's interest deepened. "This is exceptionally well documented," she said. "You've built a case for emotional abandonment, financial dishonesty, and psychological trauma during pregnancy. In South Carolina, those factors heavily influence division of property and spousal support. I don't want revenge, Brooke said softly. I just want what's fair, and I want to protect my son. Fair, Susan said flatly, is not what your husband gave you. Fair is what we're going to fight for. South Carolina is a no-fault divorce state, she continued, but the courts do consider mental and emotional cruelty, especially during pregnancy. That opens doors. We can pursue damages, and your medical records will support your claim of stress-induced complications. They went over the next steps for another 30 minutes. Susan explained how Brooke's health files, showing anxiety and elevated blood pressure, were admissible. How the financial records pointed to premeditated deception. How timing mattered, and that filing before the baby's birth could work in their favor legally. I'll need a $5,000 retainer to begin, Susan said. Will you be able to manage that without alerting him? Brooke nodded. She had already begun quietly transferring small sums from their joint account into a private one. Nothing large enough to raise suspicion. It was something Dr. Reeves had encouraged in their second session. Financial independence is emotional independence. One last thing, Susan said, leaning forward. Don't confront him yet. Let him think everything's normal while we build our case. Can you do that? I've been doing it for weeks, Brooke replied. Good, because men like your husband, they escalate when they feel cornered. Right now, he feels confident in his lies. We want to keep it that way. Until we strike. Driving home, Brooke felt something she hadn't in weeks. A strange blend of exhaustion and strength. For the first time since learning the truth, she had a plan. A real plan, backed by someone who knew exactly what she was up against. Her phone buzzed. It was Mason. Missing you and our boy. One more day and I'll be home. Brooke stared at the message for a long moment before typing her reply. We miss you too. Can't wait. The lies came easier now, maybe because they had a purpose. That evening, May Alvarez knocked on the door with a warm plate of homemade dumplings and her usual knowing gaze. How'd it go with Susan? She asked. She's going to help me fight, Brooke said. May smiled. Good. You know what my grandmother used to say? The bamboo that bends in the storm doesn't break. It grows stronger. You're bending now, but you're not breaking. Later that night, Brooke sat in the living room, organizing her digital evidence files one more time. Her phone rang, Mason calling from Dallas. Hey babe, he said smoothly. Just wanted to hear your voice before bed. In the background, Brooke heard a woman laughing. Tessa's laugh. She knew it from the old college clips Mason used to show her, back when she thought that past was long gone. Are you alone? She asked, keeping her tone light. What? Oh yeah. Just the TV. You know how loud these hotel TVs can be, he said, that familiar false casualness slipping into every word. How was your day? Any doctor appointments? Just routine stuff. Everything's fine with the baby. Great. Listen, I might be a day late coming back. This client's tough, wants to revise everything last minute. Another lie. But this time, Brooke was ready. Of course, she said softly. Do what you need to do. After ending the call, she opened her documentation app and logged the conversation, date, time, lie told, and background evidence of Tessa's presence. Susan Kim had been right. They were building a case that no one would be able to overlook. And tomorrow, Mason would return home to a wife who looked unchanged, but who was in truth someone entirely new. A woman no longer playing the victim, a woman preparing to become his opponent. Mason returned from Dallas on a Sunday evening, arms full of grocery store flowers and wearing that same charismatic smile that once made Brooke's heart flutter. Now it turned her stomach. I missed you so much, he said, pulling her into a careful hug, mindful of her swollen belly. He smelled like something expensive, cologne she didn't recognize. New. Meant for someone else. How was the trip? She asked, accepting the flowers with the appropriate hint of gratitude. Exhausting but productive. The client loved our pitch. He walked into the kitchen, casually opening the fridge like nothing had changed, like he still owned the place, which technically he did, for now. What'd you do while I was gone? He asked. Hope you got some rest. Mostly slept, Brooke replied with a small smile. She lied easily. Had a therapy session. My anxiety's been a little better. It was actually true. Having a plan, having support, having hope. It had done more for her than the medication ever could. Good, good, Mason said, pulling ingredients from the fridge, stepping right back into the role of the attentive husband home from a trip. "I brought you something else," he added, reaching into his duffel. He handed her a small jewelry box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a tiny charm shaped like a baby shoe. "Mason, it's beautiful," Brooke said, and she meant it. The gift was thoughtful, elegant, carefully chosen. It was also soaked in guilt. Probably picked up at an airport boutique between business lies and text messages to another woman. "I saw it and thought of both of you," he said, placing his hand gently on her belly. The baby kicked in response. "I can't wait to meet our son." Those words should have wrapped her in warmth. Instead, they chilled her to the bone. This man speaking so sweetly about their future, had spent the past 5 days building a completely separate one, with someone else. He talked about their son, while sneaking calls and messages to his ex. He bought baby-themed jewelry, while sleeping in hotel beds with Tess. "Will you put it on me?" she asked. His fingers were careful, almost tender, as he fastened the clasp at the back of her neck. In the hallway mirror, she caught their reflection, the perfect picture of expectant parents sharing an intimate moment. It would have made a flawless Instagram post. To the outside world, they were the image of love, of excitement, of a family just beginning. But behind the closed doors, behind the delicate charm resting against her skin, was a truth too bitter to decorate. The thought made her sick. That night, while Mason slept soundly beside her, Brooke lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to his slow, even breaths. His phone sat just 2 feet away on the nightstand, probably full of unread messages from Tess, asking about his flight, counting down hours until she saw him again. Brooke didn't need to read them anymore. She had everything she needed. The baby stirred inside her, unsettled. She placed a hand over her belly and whispered, "Just a little longer, sweet boy. Mama's getting us out." The next morning brought a new moment of clarity. While Mason showered, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Marcus, work," flashed across the screen. But when he answered, Brooke heard something entirely different. "Hey, lie. Give me 1 second." He stepped out onto the back patio, phone pressed to his ear, voice dropping into that familiar soft register she once believed was just for her. Through the kitchen window, Brooke watched him pace the small wooden deck, gesturing with his free hand, smiling at whatever was being said on the other end. She should have felt heartbroken. Instead, she felt sharpened. Each smile, each lie, each whispered name was a thread unraveling his story, leaving her with nothing but the truth and the strength to act on it. The man who had kissed her belly just hours before was now lighting up for someone else. At 7 a.m., when he came back inside, his face was calm, casual. "Work emergency," he said, drying his hair with a towel. "Might need to head in early today. Client wants to talk through some last-minute changes. You know how it is." She did. Brooke knew exactly how it was. Tess was probably already back in Charleston. Maybe she'd never even left. And now they needed to debrief after their romantic little getaway, while his very pregnant wife sat at home believing every single word. "Of course," Brooke said softly. "Do what you need to do." After Mason left, she picked up the phone and called Susan Kim. "I think it's time," she said without hesitation. "He's not even trying to be careful anymore. The lies are getting sloppy." "That's actually perfect," Susan replied. "Overconfidence leads to mistakes. Are you ready to file?" Brooke looked around the kitchen, the same space where she'd made hundreds of breakfasts for a man who thought she was blind, where she'd envisioned a future built on nothing but illusions, where she'd once believed in a kind of love that never truly existed. "I'm ready." "Good. I'll start the paperwork today. By the end of the week, your husband will realize that his life is about to change." Brooke hung up the call and sat still for a long moment, letting the weight of her decision sink in. Her hand moved to her belly. Her son kicked softly, and it felt like a quiet answer. "Yes, keep going. Yes, this is the right path." That afternoon, May Alvarez found Brooke sitting on the front steps, watching storm clouds gather over the Charleston skyline. "You look different today," May observed, easing down beside her with a familiar creak of her knees. "Lighter, maybe." "I'm filing for divorce this week." May nodded, satisfied. "About time. You know what happens to bamboo that stops bending?" Brooke smiled faintly. "What?" "It starts reaching for the sun again. Brooke touched the necklace at her throat, the silver baby shoe Mason had given her, a guilt-wrapped souvenir of a lie. It had been bought with money from accounts he thought she'd never question. Soon she'd take it off for good. But not yet. Today, she wore it as a reminder. Not just of the betrayal, but of the strength it had taken to see through it, to rise above it. That some gifts come with a price the giver never expects to pay. The process server arrived Thursday at exactly 3:47 p.m., just as Mason was pulling into the driveway after another one of those extended client lunches that always lasted 4 hours. Brooke watched from the living room window. A woman in a navy blazer stepped calmly up to Mason's car with a stack of documents. She saw it happen in real time, his face morphing from casual charm to confused hesitation, then a flicker of pure panic as he took the envelope and opened it. Inside, divorce papers, a temporary restraining order, a court-ordered asset freeze, an emergency petition for spousal support, a formal complaint citing emotional abandonment, financial deceit, and psychological cruelty during pregnancy. Mason stood in the driveway, scanning page after page, color draining from his face. When he finally looked up toward the house, Brooke was no longer at the window. She was in the kitchen, calmly steeping herbal tea, as if nothing in the world had shifted. The front door slammed so hard it rattled the picture frames lining the hallway. "Brooke!" Mason's voice thundered through the house, laced with a fury she had never heard from him before. "What the hell is this?" She turned slowly from the stove, one hand resting protectively over her belly. At 8.5 months pregnant, sudden movements weren't an option, but her calm, deliberate posture was strategic. Susan had prepared her for this exact moment. "It's exactly what it looks like," she said, voice steady. "You're divorcing me? Are you insane?" he shouted, waving the legal papers like a weapon. "You're about to give birth to our son." "Yes, and I want him born into truth, not into a world built on lies." Mason's face twisted with disbelief. "Lies? What lies? Brooke, your hormones are—" "Don't." The word was sharp, slicing through his sentence like glass. "Don't you dare blame my pregnancy for your behavior." She moved to the dining table, where her laptop was already open. She turned the screen toward him. Dozens of screenshots filled the display. Texts between him and Tess, hotel invoices, airline tickets, a digital timeline spanning 8 months of betrayal. "I know about Dallas, about the restaurants, the hotel rooms." Her voice remained even, quiet. "I know about every lie you've told me since last summer." Mason's face lost all color. He sank into the nearest chair, the legal document slipping from his hands, forgotten. "Brooke, I can explain." "No need. Your messages say everything, especially the ones where you joke about how clueless your pregnant wife is." His mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time since she had met him, Mason Hale had nothing smooth to say. "Look," he finally muttered, "whatever you think you know. I know you pulled $3,000 from our joint account last month for a weekend in San Francisco." Her voice was still calm. "Icy. I know you told her I was too tired for sex, so she didn't have to worry about competing with a pregnant woman. I know you planned to keep this going after the baby was born because, and I quote, new moms are too exhausted to notice anything." Each fact struck him like a physical hit. And with every word, Mason's polished exterior fractured completely, revealing something desperate, something unrecognizable beneath. "It didn't mean anything," he whispered. "It was just stress," Mason said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Relief, maybe. You've been so focused on the baby, I felt neglected." "Stop." Brooke stood up carefully, one hand braced on the table to steady herself. "Just stop. You don't get to make this my fault." Her phone buzzed. A text from Susan Kim. "How did he take it?" Without breaking eye contact with her husband, Brooke typed back, exactly as predicted. "Who are you texting?" Mason snapped, some of his earlier fury returning. "What lawyer did you hire? We can't afford." "We couldn't afford your affair either," she said flatly, "but you figured that out just fine." She gathered her laptop and stepped toward the hallway. "I'm staying at May's tonight. The restraining order gives you 24 hours to remove your personal items." "Brooke." "Wait." He sprang up, desperation quickly replacing rage. "We can fix this. I'll end it with Tess. I'll go to therapy, whatever you want." She stopped at the doorway, turning back to the man she once believed she'd grow old with, the man whose child now shifted inside her, as if sensing the weight of the moment. "What I want," she said quietly, "was for you to think about our family before you decided to destroy it. I never meant for this to happen." "Yes, you did. Every hotel room, every lie, every time you came home and kissed my belly while thinking about her. Each one was a choice." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "You chose her over us, Mason, every single day, for 8 months. Then she turned and walked out, leaving him standing there in their kitchen, surrounded by legal documents and the shattered pieces of a double life. Outside, May Alvarez was waiting by the gate with an overnight bag in hand and the kind of calm, proud smile that said she'd been prepared for this exact moment. "Ready?" she asked. Brooke glanced back at the house where she had built dreams that turned out to be nothing but illusions, where she had loved a man who never really existed. "I'm ready." As they walked toward May's front door, her son kicked, strong and sure, like an affirmation. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But tonight she would sleep wrapped in truth instead of lies. And that felt like the first breath of freedom. 3 days after serving Mason with divorce papers, Brooke woke to 17 missed calls and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. "Please call me back. We need to talk. This is insane. You're destroying our family. Think about our son." The last message had been sent at 4:23 a.m. "I'm losing everything." Brooke deleted them all without replying. She had a court appearance to prepare for. Today, Judge Whitaker would decide on Brooke's petition for emergency spousal support and temporary exclusive use of the marital home. Susan Kim had been confident, especially with the documented financial misconduct and the fact that Brooke was in her final weeks of pregnancy. "How are you feeling?" May asked over breakfast, studying Brooke's face with the careful scrutiny of someone who had survived her own battles. "Scared," Brooke admitted, placing a hand on her belly, where her son was practicing what felt like a full soccer match. "But ready. I dreamed about him last night," she added. "He was laughing." "Babies laugh when they feel safe," May said gently. "He knows his mama is protecting him." At the courthouse, Brooke was surprised to see Mason already there. But he wasn't alone. A tall woman with platinum blonde hair and sharp cheekbones sat beside him on the bench just outside the courtroom. Tess Monroe? In the flesh. She was striking in that high-end, curated way that came from both good genes and excellent skincare. Her burgundy blazer probably cost more than Brooke spent on groceries in a month. She looked like the kind of woman who'd never battled nausea or swollen feet or stretch marks. Mason's face lit up with something close to hope when he saw Brooke approaching with Susan. "Brooke, thank God. We need to." "Mr. Hale," Susan said smoothly, stepping in front of Brooke. "Any communication must go through me. The restraining order is still active." "This is ridiculous," Tess snapped, standing up. Her voice carried the sharpness of someone used to getting her way. "You're destroying a good man over nothing." Brooke looked at the woman who had helped unravel her marriage and felt surprisingly distant. Up close, Tess looked older than her filtered photos suggested. There were lines around her eyes that her pricey makeup couldn't fully disguise. Nothing. Susan's voice could have frozen glass. 8 months of infidelity, financial deception, emotional abandonment during pregnancy is nothing? "People make mistakes," Tess shot back. "Mason loves his wife. This whole thing is—" "If he loved his wife," Brooke said quietly, "he wouldn't have been with you." It was the first time she'd addressed Tess directly. The other woman's face flushed deep crimson. Inside the courtroom, the hearing moved quickly, with clinical precision. Susan presented the evidence. Clean, calm, methodical. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals. Medical records documenting pregnancy-related stress and elevated blood pressure. Screenshots proving the affair's duration and emotional toll. Mason's hastily hired attorney tried to argue the affair was irrelevant in a no-fault state, but Judge Whitaker wasn't having it. Emotional abandonment during pregnancy, combined with financial deception and medical impact on both mother and unborn child. The judge's voice was stern. "These are serious allegations with serious consequences." The ruling came fast and hit Mason hard. Emergency spousal support granted. Temporary exclusive use of the marital home awarded to Brooke. Asset freeze extended to include his retirement accounts. And perhaps the most damning of all, a court-ordered psychological evaluation, to be completed before any custody arrangements would even be considered. Walking out of the courthouse, Brooke felt a strange lightness, despite the weight she carried, literally and figuratively. Behind her, she could hear Mason whisper arguing with his attorney. Tessa's designer heels clacked sharply against the marble floor. "That went better than expected," Susan said under her breath as they stepped into the parking lot. "What happens now?" Brooke asked. "Now he realizes that actions have consequences," Susan replied, "and his girlfriend realizes that dating a broke man in a messy divorce isn't quite as sexy as dating a successful married one." Susan's prediction proved spot on, much sooner than either of them expected. That evening, while Brooke was having dinner in May's kitchen, her phone rang. Unknown number. "Don't answer," May advised, pouring tea. "Not tonight." But curiosity won. "Hello? Is this Brooke Hale?" A woman asked, voice soft, unfamiliar. "Yes. This is Rebecca Hale, Mason's mother." Brooke's fork paused midway to her mouth. She had met Rebecca twice in 3 years of marriage. Both encounters had been brief and chilly, social obligations that made it clear Mason's parents saw her as an impermanent fixture. "I just learned about the situation," Rebecca said. "The divorce, the affair." Her voice was brittle, clipped with restraint. "I wanted you to know that Frank and I had no idea what Mason was doing." Brooke didn't know how to respond. "And we won't be offering financial support for his legal costs," Rebecca continued. "What he did is unforgivable." There was a long pause. "But that baby you're carrying is still our grandchild, no matter what happens between you and Mason. If you ever need anything." The line went quiet, except for the faint, heartbreaking sound of Rebecca Hale crying softly on the other end. "Thank you," Brooke whispered. "That means more than you know." After the call, she sat back in May's cozy kitchen, hands folded over her belly, and for the first time in a long, long while, she felt hope. Not just for survival, but for something better, something real. Her phone buzzed again, a new message from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You'll regret destroying us." Brooke showed the message to May, who let out a sharp snort of disgust. "Empty threats from empty people," the older woman said. "You know what they say about cornered rats?" "What?" "They bite each other first." Almost on cue, Brooke's phone rang again, this time Mason calling from yet another number. "Pick it up," May suggested with a wicked smile. "Let's hear how the mighty have fallen." Brooke answered and put the call on speaker. "Brooke, please, just listen." Mason's voice was raw, broken and desperate. "Tess left me. She said she never signed up for this much drama. My parents won't answer my calls. My boss is asking questions about travel expenses. Everything's falling apart." "I know," Brooke said calmly. "You have to help me fix this. We're having a baby together." "No, Mason. You're having consequences. There's a difference." The silence on the line stretched so long, Brooke thought he might have hung up. But then his voice came again, smaller than she'd ever heard it. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "I believe you," she said softly, and she meant it. "You never meant for me to find out." This time, when she hung up, she turned her phone off completely. Outside May's kitchen window, the Charleston skyline sparkled like distant stars, pointing toward a future that, for the first time in a long while, felt possible again. The contractions began at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the court hearing that had dismantled Mason's life. Brooke woke in May's guest room to a deep, pulling sensation in her belly, different from the Braxton Hicks she'd been feeling for weeks. This was real. It was time. "May," she called out gently, wanting help, not panic. The older woman appeared in the doorway within seconds, already dressed despite the hour. "It's time?" "I think so." Another contraction came, stronger than the first. They're about 8 minutes apart. "Good. Not too fast, not too slow." May's calm presence was exactly what Brooke needed. The hospital bag was already in the car. They had planned for this. After everything that had happened, Brooke had made one thing clear. She only wanted people who loved and supported her in the delivery room. Mason wasn't on that list. The drive to Charleston General Hospital was quiet, just Brooke's breathing, timed and focused, through each wave of pain. At the admission desk, the nurse asked the usual questions. "Is the father present?" "No," Brooke replied firmly, "just me." "Emergency contact?" She squeezed May's hand. "She's my family." Labor progressed steadily, but not urgently. Brooke had requested a private room and limited visitors. Dr. Martinez checked in regularly, her calm confidence reassuring as she monitored both Brooke's progress and the baby's steady heartbeat. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Martinez said during a particularly intense contraction. "Your son is eager to meet the world." At 11 a.m., Brooke's phone started buzzing relentlessly. Mason had somehow found out she was in labor. "Please let me be there," his first voicemail begged. "He's my son too. I need to see him born." "You can't do this to me," said the second message, his voice rising. "I have rights. I'm begging you," came the third, this time cracking. "Don't punish our baby for my mistakes," May answered the fourth call. "She's busy," she said curtly, "bringing your son into the world. The same son you abandoned every time you chose another woman over his mother." "You don't understand," Mason pleaded. "I understand perfectly," May replied coldly. "You want to play father now because it's convenient. Where were you when she had panic attacks, when her blood pressure spiked, when she cried herself to sleep?" Her voice trembled, not with uncertainty but fury, the kind that builds slowly over months of watching someone you love being shattered piece by piece. May's voice was sharp enough to cut steel. "You lost the right to be here when you decided that lying was more important than loving." She hung up and shut the phone off. By 3 p.m., Brooke was in active labor, her world now reduced to the rhythm of her body and the anticipation of meeting her child. Despite the pain, she felt peaceful. With each contraction, she wasn't just pushing through the physical agony, she was pushing through grief, betrayal, disappointment, letting it all burn away, so what remained was strength. This was how it was meant to be, bringing her baby into the world surrounded by genuine love, not hollow performances. "I can see his head," Dr. Martinez announced. "One more push, Brooke." With May gripping one hand and a kind nurse holding the other, Brooke gave everything she had left. Relief flooded through her as her son slipped into the world, crying strong, his skin pink and perfect. "He's perfect," Dr. Martinez said, placing him on her chest. "Absolutely perfect." Elio Hale was born at 3:47 p.m., weighing 7 pounds, 2 ounces. His eyes were dark like his mother's, his hair soft brown, catching the warm afternoon sunlight streaming through the hospital windows. When Brooke touched his tiny fingers, he gripped hers with startling strength. "Hello, my brave boy," she whispered, tears falling freely. "We made it." The next few hours passed in a dream. Feeding, sleeping, staring in awe at the life she'd brought into the world. May snapped photos and made calls to Susan Kim and Dr. Reeves, both of whom sent flowers and warm congratulations. Brooke stared at Elio's tiny chest rising and falling, the peaceful rhythm anchoring her in a moment she knew would live in her forever. It wasn't just a birth, it was a beginning. For both of them. At 7 p.m., a gentle knock came at the door. Brooke expected another nurse, but instead, she saw a security guard standing there, his expression apologetic. "Ma'am, there's a man downstairs claiming to be the father. He's quite insistent about seeing you and the baby." "He's not welcome here," Brooke said quietly, adjusting Elio in her arms. "I have legal documentation preventing his access." "Understood. We'll make sure he doesn't bother you again." 20 minutes later, May returned from the cafeteria with an update. "He's gone," she reported. Security escorted him out after he started shouting in the lobby about his rights. Apparently, he brought that Tess woman with him. Tess came to the hospital? "She was waiting in the car," May said, her face darkening. "Probably thought this would be her chance to play stepmother to a newborn." Some people had no shame. That evening, as Elio slept peacefully in her arms, Brooke made a decision that surprised even her. She picked up her phone and typed a single message to Mason. "Elio Hale was born today at 3:47 p.m. He's healthy and perfect. When you're ready to be the father he deserves, instead of the man you've been, we can discuss supervised visits. Until then, leave us alone." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The reply came within minutes. "Thank you. I'm sorry for everything. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough." But it was honest, and that was more than he had given her in 8 months of marriage. "You did the right thing," May said, reading over her shoulder. "That boy deserves to know his father, even if his father doesn't deserve him, yet." Brooke looked down at Elio, his tiny face relaxed in sleep. Tomorrow, they would go home, to a house free of lies. Tomorrow, they would begin building a life on truth instead of pretense. But tonight, in the hush of the hospital room, with May dozing in the chair beside her, Brooke felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. Pure, uncomplicated peace. She had given birth to more than a baby today. She had given birth to herself. The woman who had once loved blindly was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and finally truly free. 6 months later, Brooke stood in the kitchen of her small apartment on the east side of Charleston, bouncing a babbling Elio on her hip while stirring oatmeal with her free hand. Sunlight streamed through the windows, filtered through simple white curtains she'd hung herself. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, bright, and hers. The apartment was a far cry from the Pinterest-perfect house she'd once shared with Mason. The furniture was mostly secondhand. The walls still needed paint, and no matter how many times she tightened it, the bathroom faucet still dripped. But every inch of the place belonged entirely to her and her son. And that made it more beautiful than any magazine spread. "Mama," Elio cooed, grabbing for the wooden spoon in her hand. At 6 months old, he was a happy, healthy baby with bright eyes and a contagious giggle that lifted Brooke's spirits, even on the hardest days. "That's right, sweet boy," Brooke cooed. "Mama's making breakfast." She kissed Elio's chubby cheek, breathing in that intoxicating baby scent that made everything else fade to the background. Her phone buzzed with a message from Susan Kim. "Final papers ready for signature. Congratulations, you're officially free." The divorce had been finalized. 3 weeks ago, Mason had agreed to all terms rather than risk a public trial that would have aired every humiliating detail of his affair. The settlement was fair, more than fair, actually. The house had been sold, giving Brooke enough for a down payment on a small place of her own when she was ready. Spousal support would cover living expenses until Elio started school. Most importantly, Mason had agreed to supervised visitation only, and only after completing therapy and anger management. In the 6 months since Elio's birth, he'd seen his son 4 times, all with a court-appointed supervisor present, each visit filled with awkward smiles and the energy of a man trying to bond with a child he barely knew. Tess had vanished entirely once the divorce proceedings began. She moved back to Seattle and blocked Mason on every platform. Brooke heard from mutual friends she was already dating a tech executive with a Mercedes and no messy baggage. Some people never changed. A knock at the door pulled her back. May stood outside, holding a container of homemade soup and wearing her usual knowing smile. "How are my favorite babies today?" she asked, reaching for Elio, who immediately lit up at the sight of his honorary grandmother and reached for her glasses with delighted little fingers. "We're good," Brooke said, handing him over. "Really good." And she meant it. The panic attacks were gone. Her blood pressure was back to normal. She slept through the night, most of the time. And when she didn't, it was because Elio was teething, not because anxiety was eating her alive. "The job interview?" May asked, settling into the rocking chair, the one splurge Brooke had made furnishing the apartment. "I got it," Brooke grinned. She couldn't keep the excitement out of her voice. "Part-time, remote work for a nonprofit that supports women in crisis. I can work from home while Elio naps, and they're super understanding about flexible schedules." "Perfect," May said, rocking Elio gently. "Using your experience to help others, it was perfect." For the first time in her adult life, Brooke was choosing work that mattered to her. Not just work that paid the bills or looked impressive on a resume. The pay wasn't much, but combined with her settlement and careful budgeting, it would be enough. That afternoon, while Elio napped, Brooke sat at her small desk answering emails for her new job. A woman in Asheville was trying to leave an abusive marriage, but didn't know how to gather evidence safely. Another in Colombia needed help finding legal aid after discovering her husband's gambling had emptied their accounts. Each message reminded Brooke how lucky she'd been to have had May, Susan Kim, and Dr. Reeves in her corner. Not every woman had those kinds of allies. But maybe she could be one now. Her phone rang around 3 p.m. Mason's name flashed across the screen. Their first direct contact since the hospital. "Hello, Mason." "Hi," he said, his voice smaller than she remembered. Uncertain. "I was calling about this weekend's visit. I know it's scheduled for Saturday, but I was wondering, could we maybe make it Sunday instead?" I've got a therapy appointment Saturday morning and I don't want to rush. Brooke was quiet a moment, processing. The old Mason would have demanded the schedule change to suit him. No explanation, no care, just control. This version was asking, explaining, prioritizing his mental health. Sunday works fine, she said. How's therapy going? Hard, he admitted. Really hard. But Dr. Patterson says that's normal. He paused. Brooke, I know I don't have the right to ask, but is Elio happy? Is he healthy? He's perfect, she said simply. He's starting to sit up on his own, laughs at everything, loves music, hates green beans. She could hear Mason smile through the line. Thank you, he said softly, for letting me know, for letting me see him, even after everything. He deserves to know his father, she replied, when you're ready to be one. I'm trying, he said. I really am. I know. After she hung up, Brooke felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. Not for reconciliation. That door was sealed shut forever. But hope for Mason's healing. Because Elio deserved better than a broken father dragging guilt and shame around like anchors. That evening, as she bathed Elio in the kitchen sink, he splashed and giggled with unfiltered joy. His laughter filled the small apartment, echoing off walls that had never heard lies or held betrayal. You know what, baby boy? Brooke whispered, wrapping him in a warm towel. We're going to be just fine. Through the window, she could see Charleston's lights twinkling in the distance. Somewhere out there, Mason was probably sitting alone in his studio apartment, trying to figure out how to rebuild the life he'd broken. But here, in a two-bedroom walk-up with chipped tile and second-hand furniture, Brooke already had everything she needed. Looking at the court-ordered photos of the son he was slowly getting to know in a different home, Mason felt the weight of what he'd lost. Tess was now building a new life with someone else, laying bricks on the broken foundation they once shared. But here, in this small, imperfect, honest apartment, Brooke was building something entirely new. Something real. A life where love wasn't performed for others, where trust wasn't a gamble she couldn't afford, where her son would grow up knowing that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it looked like walking away. As she tucked Elio into his crib, he grabbed her finger with his tiny hand and held on tight. Sweet dreams, my brave boy, she whispered. Tomorrow is going to be beautiful. And for the first time in over a year, she truly believed it would be. She had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept less than you deserve. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is start over. And sometimes the end of one story is actually the beginning of something far better. 1 year later, a wedding invitation arrived in the mail. Not her own. Those dreams had belonged to a different version of herself. This one was cream-colored with elegant gold script, announcing the marriage of 2 co-workers from her new job. As she held the smooth cardstock in her hands, Brooke felt nothing but genuine happiness for them. No bitterness, no cynicism, just quiet grace. She had learned that one man's betrayal didn't mean love was a lie for everyone else. Elio, now 18 months old, toddled over on shaky legs, babbling something that sounded suspiciously like "Mama Book" while pointing at the invitation. He was fearless in his tiny explorations, curious about every corner of their small world. Just mail, sweet boy, she said, lifting him into a hug. Nothing important. Through the living room window, she could see May tending to her garden. Even at 72, the older woman moved with strength and purpose. Next month, Brooke would begin evening classes to pursue a degree in social work. May had already promised to babysit, claiming that reading Elio bedtime stories was the highlight of her week. The future stretched before them, uncertain but bright with possibility. There would be hard days, money would always be tight. Single motherhood was relentless, and one day she would have to answer Elio's inevitable questions about why his parents didn't live together. But there would also be joy, growth, the kind of peace that comes from building a life on truth instead of performance. As she watched Elio stack blocks on the floor, only to knock them down with delighted laughter, Brooke smiled. Sometimes you have to tear everything down before you can build something worth keeping. So the story has ended, our wonderful friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you're still watching, there's a reason. Something in this story has echoed in your heart. Maybe it's the pain of betrayal, the quiet strength of starting over, or the fierce love of a mother refusing to settle for less. Whatever it is, you're not alone, and that matters. You see, Brooke's journey wasn't just about heartbreak, it was about reclaiming power. She reminds us that even in our most vulnerable moments, we can choose to be strong. As Brené Brown once said, you can choose courage or you can choose comfort. You cannot have both. And Brooke chose courage. Maybe you're at a crossroads. Maybe you're carrying silent pain. But healing doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means loving yourself enough to walk away when staying costs too much. This story isn't just fiction. It's a mirror. It shows us that peace isn't found in the perfect house or the perfect partner. It's found in truth, in honesty, in rebuilding something real, block by block, breath by breath. Let this be your reminder. You are allowed to rewrite your story. You are allowed to protect your peace. And most importantly, you are allowed to start over, no matter how deep the betrayal or how long the silence. If the story has moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Not just for us, but for someone out there who might be where Brooke once was. Let them know they're not alone. Let them know that light does come after the dark. And if you're still here at this hour, I see you. We see you. You're part of this space, this healing, this brave little corner of the internet where stories are more than entertainment, they're lifelines. Thank you for staying. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, take care of your heart. It's worth protecting.